First things first is try not to trip up going up onto the stage. First of all, I'm going to introduce myself, but I think one of the key points I'm going to make throughout the whole of this presentation is I hate the phrase transport planning. I detest that phrase. And I've called myself, for the 20 years I've worked in this business, a movement planner. And the way I phrase it is I want people to move more, but to travel less. I want you to think about how you move, not how you travel. And that's a big benefit. And the other thing, I was getting more and more nervous this morning, listening to all these presentations about all these systems-led approach, about how everybody's working together, because actually a lot of what I'm going to talk about is the practicality of this, of what happens on the ground, what I do for a day job, and listening to all these systems approaches, and John's touched on it a little bit there, and actually what happens in life. I spend 50% of my life talking, arguing, discussing with highways officers, with local transport officers, with active travel people, with councillors, to try and get what we've all just been talking about this morning. All of this wonderful talk this morning is not necessarily seen on the ground. And so why is that might seem negative? I'm going to put it in a positive spin. I'm going to use an example, and I've very deliberately used an example of Portlaoise in the Republic of Ireland, primarily because I didn't know which local authorities were going to be here today and didn't want to upset anybody. So I decided to choose one in the Republic. But everything we do could be, everything I'm going to talk about can be put anywhere inside the United Kingdom or the world, and I'll finish with a couple of examples at the end. But first of all, my marketing team will shout at me if I don't tell you a little bit about LUC. We're essentially a collection of environmentalists, psychologists and designers who try and build a better urban environment. I'm not going to, you can read all about that. We've got lots of different disciplines, but everything is all based around creating a better environment for people to live in. It's all about bringing everything together, creating a low carbon environment. I know that's a phrase which is bandied about a lot at the moment, but it's something which has been part of our ethos for many, many years. And I've worked in the massive big corporate sectors and have now moved across to a smaller company whose actual ethos is low carbon. So, right, back on the topic. Why is transportation movement important for healthy activity? A number of reasons. We've heard all about them this morning. Heard lack of exercise and obesity. Heard all about social exclusion. We've heard lots about all of these. And I'm going to pick a couple of transport ones as well. Congestion. Everybody talks about the future of transport, autonomous vehicles, all this wonderful. What a pile of nonsense. I'm sorry, autonomous vehicle is still a car. It's still a social exclusion. It's still a barrier. And you know what? We've had autonomous vehicles on the roads for 100 years. They're called taxis. So think about it. All of this idea is not based towards congestion, because we're not solving congestion by looking at that future of transport in terms of autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles. They're run by automotive industry, not by people who want to go down it. They're saving their own back. What you can do for congestion, and the side of it, is to move cars off the street. Get rid of the air quality problem. You know, is an electric vehicle solving an air quality problem? No, you've just moved it to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where they mine the cobalt for the batteries. Trust me, I've been there. It's not pleasant. Think about it. But more importantly, everybody's talking about, car ownership's going down, people's driving licenses are going down. Stats don't show that. Stats don't show that. Car ownership has remained very static. So it has. People using the car has remained very static. In fact, post-pandemic, we're seeing car ownership going way up. Why? Because people don't want to get in public transport. Why? Because we haven't designed a good urban environment for them. So that's the framing of this. Honestly, I'm not always negative. Trust me, I am positive occasionally. What can we do to help? And John's touched on this a little bit, but design. Think about design at the very start of your project, or whatever project happens to be, whether it's a local transport plan, whether it's a development. And I'm going to say something else negative, typical. One group missing here today, private developers. You know, okay, maybe there's one, sorry. Private developers, they control lots of land, they have lots of control of what's happening to the urban environment. We need to engage them in the process as well. Don't forget about them. I have to work with some of the best of them, and I have to also work with some of the worst. So just think about them as well. But bring your design element in. Don't start from the point of view, as John says, of actually what's the traffic going to be and then go and fix it. Understand the problem. Understand what's the problem. Why do people do things? What do people move? Why do people move? What are they trying to do? What are their needs? Behavioural change, we've had lots of people discuss this all morning, and yes, that's a key element of what we do as transport planners, movement planners, whatever you want to call us. And it's no coincidence that lots of sort of the more forward-thinking planning companies are now employing psychologists, because we're thinking about how we get behavioural change in. But one of them, I don't know how this works, is the challenge side of it. I said it earlier on, I spend 50% of my time discussing with officers. Movement planners challenge the norm. Transport planners accept the norm. And I think that's the big difference. So don't be afraid to challenge, and that's where you've really got to go in. Challenge the norm. Don't think, as John said, about predict and provide. I'm a consultant, so I'm going to say, when should we get involved? Right at the very start. Please bring us in the very beginning, and this is where we're going on to Portlaoise. Look at the context of your site. Look at the context of your development. Look at the context of your local plan. What are the opportunities there? Don't think, actually, here's a wonderful local plan, and then I'll bring a movement planner, transport planner in a later date. Think what's at the very start. Bring that at the very forefront of what you're thinking about. Don't just leave it there. Don't just say, oh, actually, that will happen. Think, what can I do to increase movement in this area? Say, not travel, but movement. What can I do to increase how people are using the area? I wish the little button would work on this, the pointer. But oh, there we go. That's the site I've been talking about, Portlaoise. Big site. It's in the Republic of Ireland. So how do we start? It's a massive site. This is a public-private partnership. The private developer wanted as many houses as he possibly could get on it. The public sector wanted, oh, we need to do something more with this. We had to bring the two of them together. But what are the opportunities here? How does it link into the local area? What can it do? What can we do to improve it? Once we've worked out where it impacts the local area, where are the areas of impact? Where can we make the most difference? Now, I got criticised for this because it's all roads here. I deliberately did that. I looked at the roads and I thought to myself, as John says, what would the highway interventions be in that point, or the road interventions be at that point? How much would they cost? Right, brilliant. We've got delay on them, who cares? It's going to cost X amount to fix that. You know what's a big behavioural change incentive if you can't drive in the centre of Portlaoise? But you know what, I'm not going to fix that. I'm going to take that money you spent, we're going to spend on that and create a much better development. Go back to my highways officer again, who's not very happy at this point, who thought he was going to get a lovely set of road infrastructure improvements. Well, no, he's not. Because what we then showed him, we started with these, and these are fairly standard, well standard sort of movement planning elements. It's called walking and cycling isochrones. Where can we get to from our development by cycling and walking? What are the points in the plan where we see it? You know, where's people's employment sites? Where's people's leisure sites? Where are the bus stops? How can we improve and how can we connect into those? How can we get people to walk to those? How can we get people to leave their car behind? So really starting to think about this and bringing a holistic approach in. I don't care whether you happen to sit for 5 minutes at that junction. So what? You know what? From that site there to that junction there was 4 minutes walk. It was 2 minutes cycling. If there had been a cycle improvement, I'd cycled it. I was terrified. Horrendous from road. But who cares? Let's get the idea that we get rid of the idea of I'm going to improve the size of that, I'm going to get the radius better, I'm going to do this nonsense you get in lots of traditional transport planning. Think about it and actually how can we get people to move to that area better? How can we get people to get from that site, wrong button, that site there, into the major shopping area there, the town centre there, the educational facilities there? How can we get people to walk, cycle to those? Not how can we get people to get into their car to drive to them? local highways officer, or roads officers there in the Republic, wasn't happy. We had to take him on a journey. We had to put him through this journey. I think this slide sums it up, basically, and especially this one here. Computer says no. My transport model says the junction is going to be stuffed. Brilliant. Superb is my response to that normally. But trying to get that through to an officer who has for 30 years sat and looked at an Arkney model, a Piccadilly model, a Lindsay model, whatever model it happens to be, and can tick a box to say, I've looked at that, is one of the key challenges we as an industry face. And we've really got to think about that. And as John rightly says, there is such an opportunity at the moment. We've just had the biggest movement planning experiment in history of the pandemic. What an opportunity to take the lessons learned from that to try to educate our local officers. What Jenny was saying about the active travel element of it. Let's get that focus down on the local officer. Bring it down. You know what? I write these all the time. I'm not sure why. Because actually they do nothing. Let's change our planning process to actually have active travel and movement at its heart. Let's not worry about the fact that there's going to be a few more vehicles on the road. You know what? If they get stuck, they'll move out of their vehicles. That's what we're trying to plan to do. Let's get progressive transport plans. I helped Portlaoise change their transport plan for that area to turn around and say, well, actually, get rid of all these ideas about creating a lovely corridor through here, or creating new roads here, and actually this school requires a big roundabout to get into it. No, it doesn't. This school requires a small gate for maybe the old teacher to take their car in. And actually what we then need to do is to improve the mobility links around the area. Involve the design teams at the very start. Bring your design team in at the very start of the process. Too often, transport movement is kind of stage 3, if those who know REBA stages are brought in for planners, because it's not thought about, oh yeah, the architects created a wonderful building. So what? Can you get access to it? Let's think about how we bring that movement in at the very start, bring it in to create an integrated approach. And that's what we did at Portlaoise. We challenged everything. We really made sure that we were there at the start. The public authority was in with us. We brought the private developer in with us. We brought everybody together to try and create a proper design team, rather than having a pile of systems over here, a local officer over here, and never the twain shall meet. Because you know what? Having your systems is brilliant. And everybody's been talking about them all morning, so this is why I'm slightly nervous about saying this. Having your systems is brilliant. But actually, if your local officer, your local councillor, your local MP doesn't buy into them, it doesn't make a difference if you've got the best systems in the world, because they're the ones in the planning authority, and they'll just say no. And then you have to go through a very expensive appeal procedure into public inquiries, etc. So really think about how movement goes in. I've just put some practical measures up here, and I've done 2 slides of practical measures. And one of the key elements when we were talking about this, and again in Portlaoise and around other areas, is public consultation. No matter what we do in all our systems, no matter what we put in place, if the public don't buy into it, it doesn't make a jot. So talk to the public, speak to them, engage with them, have open sessions, bring them in. What do you want to see? And I'm using a site here, so I'll stick to this site. What do you want to see in this site? What are your wishes, your desires? Sometimes you'll get an answer that you don't want to hear, i.e. I want 600 car parking spaces. That's when you've got to start to educate. But that's part of the process, because you're educating the public under what should be happening on the movement element of it. Bring in open spaces. So often, especially when you've got private developers, they just want to cram as much in as possible because it's all about profit. I'm not saying Homes England for this, John, sorry. It's all about profit. Actually, let's encourage them. So I'm working with Land Securities, one of the biggest private sector developers in the United Kingdom. And we've managed to persuade them actually that open space is profit. And they're seeing that. And they're showing that they're seeing because they're seeing much higher values for their units. But you know what? That's just a side impact. That's an enabler to get the open space, which allows people to move, which allows people to have their exercise. You're just providing an enabler to allow what we're out to do, which is to get people to move more, to have better and healthier lifestyles. Design, we'll talk about design and cycle paths. Again, make sure they're integrated, make sure they connect. And this here, and this figure here, to me, is the absolute be-all and end-all figure in movement planning. That is roughly how many meters people will walk to access elements such as public transport, such as schooling, etc. When you start going above that, you see a massive degradation in people choosing to use active modes. So that 800 metres is a really key figure. Think about that 800 metres. What can we do inside that 800 metres to get people to move better? I'm not saying you need to move your bus stops into that 800 metres. What I'm saying is make that first 800 metres more pleasant. Because trust me, if you've walked a couple of hundred metres and you haven't realised you've walked a couple of hundred metres or cycled a couple of hundred metres, your 800 metres starts from that point. So always think, what can I do to make that better? How can I integrate design in? Oh, I've got another element of bad formatting. Sorry. But look at it. This one here, and I'm using the housing development, and this is an interesting one at Portlaoise. And we talk about parking standards. And I, for years, have tried to get mass house builders to change this. Is don't have driveways in front of your cars. Don't walk out of your door and have the first thing you see being your car. What are you going to do then? You're going to get into it and drive. Yeah, it's common sense. So actually, at Portlaoise, what we did was, this is a bad example, but was we got, the first thing you see when you walk out your door was your bike shed. Simple psychology. You walk out, you see a bike shed. So the first mode of transport you see is your bike, not your car. And you know what? Because you've been moved in, we had an active travel pack when you've moved in, which was part of the design code. You've also realised, actually, you know what? I can now cycle to the local centre. I can now cycle to my primary school, my secondary school. Oh, I don't need to use my car, I'll just leave it behind. And again, I'm not anti-car. It's an integrated solution. But what we're trying to do is get people to think about what mode they're using. Don't have your vehicles in front of your house. I've just spoken about that. Let's move them away. Move them to an area where they can't be seen. So let's bring it away. And again, that's quite hard for private developers because they see that as going, oh, no, nobody's going to buy it and they can't see the car. Well, actually, you know what we've proven over the years we can do that. Open space, we've talked about. This is one of my bugbears in life. How often do we see a design being put in and, oh, there's a play park put in, this isn't it wonderful, there's a brilliant play park, and it's actually stuck in the corner behind a suds pond, which nobody can get access to. Have this as integral, as central to what you're trying to do. Have areas where people feel safe to play, where children feel safe to play. Have areas where adults feel safe to sit. Have it naturally overlooked, and this is part of the key parts of Portlaoise, was to make sure all our paths were naturally overlooked, to make sure the play areas were naturally seen so people felt safe in the environment. And that, again, is another key element to making sure people move better, is they have to feel safe. If they don't feel safe, they're not going to use it. It can be the world's best design, but they're not going to use it. So I've talked a lot about all of these, and I'm not quite sure of my time. Sorry, too excellent. So what was the outcome? You think it's going to be the world's best development, the way I've been talking about it. Well, actually, it's a compromise. And this is the outcome. That's the housing on that site. That was the open space and the paths. That's not going to be the norm. However, we were able to get densities, etc., enough that the private developer was happy up here. And we were then able to say to the Highways Authority, or Roads Authority as they are there, to say, actually, we're not going to spend all that money on your roads improvement. What we're going to do, we're going to provide you some pitches and open space areas at the bottom. We're going to provide you all of these paths through this area because people can then move. You know what? Every single one of these paths connected to one of the areas which we talked about earlier on, be it shopping, be it access to health, be it access to public transport. And we then said, okay, we'll give you some money for your local road network. And we gave them some money, and we enacted cycling lanes, and we enacted shared use paths, etc., to connect the whole area. We helped fund a new bus service. So it is possible to do. It just requires a lot of challenging of the norm. And I'm going to finish on a slide. I'm involved in the Mecca master plan, moving 3 million people in 5 days for the Hajj. I've modelled it, literally. And you can take my word for it, there's 3 million people actually do this over the whole thing. And we looked at the model, and you're going, but I don't even like models. There aren't any vehicles in this model. It's all pedestrians. And we looked at what attracted, and we gave it the feature of attractiveness. So that big area in the middle there is actually the biggest thing we could have done. And that's shade, because you're in Saudi Arabia, it's shade. All of what I've been talking about here can be put in a large scale. And I'm doing the master plan for Pristina in Kosovo at the moment. You know what? The starting point with the municipality of Pristina said to me was, I don't care about the car. I want to have this a better pedestrian and living environment. I take that to the vast majority of authorities in the United Kingdom and I'd be laughed at. Yet Bogota, Pristina, Mecca, massive world cities, massive cities, smaller cities are putting this in the front, yet we in the United Kingdom have all these systems in place. But the practicality of my day job means that I spend more time arguing rather than designing. Thanks.